Hey you guys, it's me Laura. I'm a homeschooling mom for 3 kids ages 10, 6, and 13. And today I'm so excited because I am starting my new reading method goal vlog setup for 2024. So this is going to be different than what I usually have done in the past, but I thought, why not try something different? So I have this bag with books on my shelf, books that I have on Audible, books that I have a wish list at the library, like all the books that I already have access to currently are in here on stickers. And so when it's time for me to read a new book, I am going to pick out a sticker and go for it. So in this case, I am getting ready to do a bunch of cleaning, not currently listening to an audiobook, so I need to pick an audiobook. So it might take a few picks for me to get one that I have access to on audio, but the first one that I pick, unless I really don't like it, I'm gonna go with it. And as I do this, instead of coming and doing TBR vlogs with you guys, like books that I'm going to read, I'm just going to share with you the books that I pick. I'll kind of do vlog style along the way instead of maybe sitting down and doing one big vlog, although there might be a mix. So I don't know, we're going to see how this goes, but I'm going to pick my first one. Let's see, is this available? I don't have this one audio. Let's see, not audio here. I'm going to find the first one with an audio. See, I have written on the back, for example, where I have access to the book. So if there's nothing there, it's just on my shelves. But if I like this one, I have on Kindle. So that's where I have it written. So, okay, here we go. Our first one, Libby Kindle and Libby Audio. This is Wolf Hollow by Lauren Walk. I know very little about this, except that it has gotten a lot of good reviews. And at some point I was really interested in it, so I added it to my list. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one downloaded, and that's what I'm going to listen to start out the year. Finished this one up and I'm about to take it back to the library, so I thought I'd share a few thoughts about it with you. This is Show Us Who You Are. It's by Elle McNichol, and I love her books. She also wrote A Kind of Spark, which was in my top 5 last year. So this is about a girl named Cora who has autism, and she's kind of struggling at her school. Her best friend has moved away. The kids aren't very nice to her. The teachers don't all treat her very nicely because she is neurodivergent and they don't really know how to connect with that. So while she is at a fancy dinner party for her brother's work, she meets the boss's son, Adrian, who is very different from anyone that she's ever met, and she's not really sure what she thinks of him at first, but turns out he has ADHD, and he doesn't really care what people think of him. He's homeschooled, and he tries to get Cora to just really embrace who she is and not care about what other people think. So they develop this friendship, and meanwhile, there's a project going on at her older brother's job. We're at Pomegranate Institute, and I don't want to go into a lot of what is going on there. It's a lot of mystery, a lot of AI and holograms and futuristic kinds of things, but this is ultimately a story that is about embracing who you are, and that just because you're different or disabled or whatever the case may be doesn't mean that you're less than. So this is what it is all about, and I absolutely love Elle McNichol's characters. Because she is autistic, writing about neurodivergent characters, she really kind of hits the mark, and I found myself taking notes on multiple quotes from the book that I feel like I personally can relate to a lot, and so that was really interesting. I also found that this was a book that I was eager. Some books, you know, I just kind of read to, and there's other books that I can't wait to pick up and read again. This was one of those. I did feel like some of the stuff with the Pomegranate Institute was a little bit weirder than I like in a book, and I felt like the ending was very much not very realistic. I mean, it was a middle grade book, and I felt like it was wrapped up in a way very much that you would expect for this age group, but I do like the overall messaging, the overall theme, and I don't know, I loved Cora, I loved meeting the characters, I loved watching the story, the intense parts, seeing the growth, really seeing how people deal. This talks a lot about grief and how we manage grief, especially when we lose somebody that we love. So all of that was in here, and it was just really good. So I definitely recommend this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Oh, one other thing to note, there is some mild language in this book, which I'm not a huge fan of in middle grade, but I know that that doesn't bother some people at all. It wasn't enough for me to stop reading or anything like that. So yeah, that is this one. I like to read lots of books that match with whatever I'm teaching the kids in unit study, both so that I can be a better teacher, and also just it helps me get excited for what we're learning. And I had gotten a little while back several books from Book Outlet that were related to the Cold War, and this was one of them. When I saw how thick it was, I immediately thought, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into? It's a nonfiction. It's called The Last Million by David Nasaw, and it's about Europe's displaced persons from World War II, Cold War. And so far, I am absolutely loving it. I'm only, let's see, where am I? I'm only 42 pages in at this point, but I'm already learning so much. Just a lot of the history. Right now I'm understanding a lot of the drive behind anti-Semitism during this time and as Hitler was coming to power, just a lot of the politics, a lot of what was going on, and having a better understanding of that I think is going to help me as I go into Cold War stuff with the kids, and understanding a lot of the anti-Semitism during the Red Scare in the US. And again, I mean, just learning so much, and I'm not finding this boring or difficult to get through at all, which is typical of a nonfiction that is like this dense. So I'm excited to keep reading it and see what I discover, and excited to share that with you. But so far, I'm really enjoying it. I realized I never did a review of Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys, so this was a 4-star review from me. This is about a girl named Lena who lived in Latvia in 1941, so this really pairs so well with the book that I'm reading, the nonfiction like tome that I'm reading right now. I did not plan that, but it turned out so well, because this explains what I was reading about, like exactly where I was at. But in this book, Lena and her family are gathered up by the Soviet Union, or Soviet officials, sorry, and put into train cars that are filthy and a mess, and they're taken out into the middle of nowhere in Siberia. And basically it's just their journey there, and then they're taken at another point, they're taken away to Arctic, and just enduring all of the horrible conditions that they had to endure. And it gave a really good picture of why, you know, these nations, a lot of these Baltic nations, were stuck between two evil, horrible leaders, Stalin and Hitler. And they were hoping that Hitler would save them from Stalin. He wasn't better, and then the Americans, were they going to come in and save them? And just that whole picture, it was really good. And I appreciated Sepetys. She's always so good at creating characters. And so even though there were several characters in this book that were adjacent to Lena and her family and the main characters. You felt like you got to know them all, which made the tragedies and the losses feel even greater as you're reading the book. This is definitely a YA book, not a middle grade, because Zappetti really tries to paint an honest picture, and as you can imagine, that is devastating. There's not really any other words for it. There were a lot of flashbacks in this book of Lena remembering her days before they were captured, and I didn't really find those additive to the story. I probably would have left those out, but they weren't super distracting. They just kind of, I mean, they were a little bit of an interruption, and I can see why they were in there. They were kind of showing the change, but I wasn't a huge fan of those in this case. I just wanted to kind of get through them and get back to the story. I also was kind of shocked by the ending, and this is why this book did not get 5 stars from me. The ending was kind of abrupt. I felt like we were leading up to all of this thing, and then boom, it just kind of ended, and I would have liked to have seen that played out a little bit more. Lena has such strength, and I would like to see kind of how that strength got her through post where the book ends. I think that would have been really neat, and maybe that's an opportunity for a sequel. I don't know. But I just felt like I love hearing parts of history that are not often shared, and there's so much to this story that I don't want to give away, that makes it unique and special, and I really enjoyed reading this. And I think because I read it while I'm reading nonfiction about that same time period and what the people were going through, I think it makes it even more real and helps me have a greater appreciation for it as well. Hey guys, excuse the look. I know I need to take a shower. I'm about to do that. But I just finished listening to the book How to Educate a Citizen by E.D. Hirsch Jr. I listened to it on Libby audiobook, and I have feelings about this book. So from an educational perspective, a lot of this is the person behind the core knowledge, big proponent of Common Core, one of the main drivers, maybe the main driver of that whole idea and the whole movement. And a lot of this comes from the idea that education is much more effective when you're working with people who have a shared knowledge base, when you can build from knowledge that you already have, when you're not just focusing on skills-based learning, but you're pulling those things out from a knowledge base. All of that is really good. And I think that there's definitely, I mean, I write a curriculum that's unit study, very knowledge-based learning. So there's a lot of that I was behind. A lot of the studies that he shared I found very fascinating, but I also found myself very frustrated with a lot of his reasons behind a lot of what he is a proponent of have to do with politics. It's very political, and I do not like politicizing education. I am not a proponent for it. I know, I mean, it's public education, so there's going to be some politics involved at some point, right? And I also have to understand that I'm working with this from the perspective of homeschooling. I do have classroom experience. I grew up with parents who are teachers, so that whole conversation is definitely in my head as well. But I do think that there's value in, I mean, think about it, when your whole family is learning the same topic at the same time on different levels and exploring it in different ways, the learning can be so much deeper and so much more meaningful. And I think that's a lot of what I resonated with in the things that he was sharing. I didn't, however, like that the whole point of this is so that we can have strong American citizens who feel a particular way about the country, who feel a particular way about all of the topics, who everybody knows the same things. And he even mentioned at one point in his book where all of the kids in the same state are learning the same thing on the same day. And to me, that is just really scary and kind of ridiculous. I mean, even from a practical perspective, I think in his ideal world, this would be happening all over the nation, but you have places that have snow days, places that have to close school because there's too many people sick. You have all of these things that don't match up, and it doesn't make sense. I do think that the idea of covering these basic science topics, these basic history topics, making sure that we touch on these basic things in the K through 2 years, and working with that makes sense. I think that it should not be very specific in the way that it is told, though. Like, for example, you need to learn about the human body, the digestive system. That's great. I think that's perfect. But what specifically we have to know about the digestive system. I think a lot of it too is because I'm someone who feels like if everybody learns only the exact same thing about a particular topic, when there are so many angles that you can approach it from, and people having those different angles and those different viewpoints and bringing those together, I feel like that is really where true knowledge and growth happens, because we can learn from each other, we can learn from other people's perspectives. And I felt like that was a little bit of what this author was missing. When he talked about a lot of the objections to this, he just basically said, well, the objections are wrong. I mean, he spent a long time saying that, so it kind of seemed like he was giving more explanation, but he really wasn't. He just said they're wrong. So my question is, why are people having these same objectives over and over again? Where are they coming from? What are the issues that they need to be addressed? And can that be addressed and work in this system? So anyway, I could go on and on because this is a book about education, and I have lots of thoughts and feelings about education, and I feel like I'm constantly growing and learning more. I almost didn't read this book because of the politics at the beginning. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I didn't put it on my DNF because it did make me think, and I think anything that challenges, I'm someone who feels like just because something challenges your beliefs or something is different from what you believe, that doesn't mean that there cannot be value in engaging with it. And I think that sometimes there can be more value because it gets you to question and consider and reevaluate your own thoughts and kind of sharpens your own thinking as well. If all we ever do is read and consume things that align with our beliefs 100%, then we're never going to grow as people. And I think that's part of my whole thing with some of his standpoint in all of this. So anyway, it was interesting. I definitely appreciate the core knowledge resources that are online and the free resources that are provided. And I think that there's a lot of good that can come from it. But I think to follow his points and his philosophy to the extreme would be kind of dangerous. It kind of screamed propaganda to me in a lot of ways, which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. But that is my review. I gave it 3 stars because I didn't agree with a lot of it, but it did make me think. And any book that makes me really think and that I want to stick all the way through, I think deserves at least 3 stars. So that's what I gave this one. Before I jump in the shower, I realized I have enough footage to put a video up from January's reading, so I thought I would do that and kind of wrap things up a little bit here. I am still currently reading Deeper Reading. So this is an educational book. I'm having a really hard time getting through this one, so we'll see what happens. It's kind of dry, and this is a part of education that I struggle with personally, so we'll see. We'll see if I can get through that. I'm reading The Lord of the Rings with my oldest. I'm also reading The Chocolate Dragon, or The Dragon with the Chocolate Heart, something like that, with my middle. And we wrapped up for our unit study Escape from Mr. Limoncello's Library, which I've read before. I love that book. And this is my current book that I just downloaded from Libby for my audiobook read, and I'm still working through my large nonfiction book. That will probably take a while. So as far as my DNFs this month, I DNF'd 5 books. I told you guys I'm a chronic DNFer. So this one I DNF'd because it was a little bit, I don't do well with animal cruelty or that type of thing, and I just couldn't take it, so I didn't do that one. And this one, I don't remember, why did I DNF? Because of Mr. Chirrup? Yeah, no, it was just the tone of the book. It just wasn't a tone that I really resonate with or appreciate. So again, if I DNF these, you don't have to agree with me on these. This is why there's so many wonderful books. It just was not a tone that I appreciated. So this one I was so sad about. So I got early copy of The Sailor Cipher, which is the next series from Explorer Academy. And we love Explorer Academy around here. I didn't like it. It didn't have the fast pace of the other Explorer Academy books. It had more of a fantasy element in it than a sci-fi element. I didn't feel like the characters were as well developed. Just in general, it just was not as developed and it wasn't as good. And so I got quite a ways into it, but I found that I just was reading it because I felt like I had to, and so I didn't finish it. 2 Degrees by Alan Gratz. I normally love Alan Gratz's books. They're really fast-paced, really whatever, but I also really don't like it when books are super obvious. So this is a book about climate change, and I think that's a great topic, but I felt like it was just so obvious and it felt kind of preachy a little bit, the way it was written, and I got frustrated by it, so I stopped. And Spy School by Stuart Gibbs. I've tried several Stuart Gibbs books and I don't like the language that he uses for his target audience. It's a little bit much for me. So this one definitely was having some language and some other issues. It seemed like a good book though, so if language doesn't bother you at all, might be a great book, but it's not something that I'm particularly thrilled about in middle grade books. I don't mind it as much in YA, depending on how language is used, but yeah. So that was my DNF, and the books that I finished were Escape from Limoncello's Library, which is a 4.5-star book. I really like that one. Shows Who You Are, which I told you about, by Ellie McNichol, which was 4 stars. Between Shades of Grey by Rudy Sepetys, which was also 4 stars. And How to Educate a Citizen by E.D. Hirsch Jr., which was 3 stars. So that is my reading for the month. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the format and how I'm doing this. I'm making it for you, so if it's boring, I need to fix something, and I'd love to know. And I hope to share more of my reading adventures with you along the way. And I'd love to hear anything that you've read so far or that you're reading that you're really enjoying in January or February. And I hope that you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.